Dominating season while men's baseball fall to the Warhawks. Caitlin Clark loses the national championship but will forever go down as one of the greatest in women's college basketball. We have all this and more here on Titan Recap.
Yeah.
Welcome to Titan Recap. My name is Dylan Shabilsky. Tonight I am joined by Jack Porter and Ben Colomb as we recap the best in Titan athletics and sports around Wisconsin. Although, tonight is a little bit different because of March Madness. All right, everyone is talking about women's basketball, so let's start off our March Madness conversation with women's basketball. I'm going to throw it out to the table, but I want to know, what does losing mean for Caitlin Clark, who has lost back-to-back years while being the face of women's basketball?
I mean, you just said it. She's the face of women's basketball. And I mean, for the last 2 years now, like, despite the fact that she's lost in the national championship, she's still gone on and broken records that we never thought we would see broken. And I mean, she's gone out in these last 3 games of her career at Iowa, where each one broke the record for most watched women's basketball game of all time. The championship was the most watched basketball game of any level of basketball since 2019. So I think if you need something to point at and tell you what Caitlin Clark's legacy is, I think it's right there. It's just that everybody is watching her. She's just phenomenal. And I think you look at some of the athletes in sports history that have walked away from the game without rings. She's not the first one that hasn't won something like that. So I don't think it diminishes her legacy in any way.
Yeah, and exactly, like, she'll still be drafted number 1. She's going to go to the Indiana Fever. Indiana's not that far away from Iowa. It just makes sense. A crowd is going to be drawn to Indiana. And I think that her following, her legacy will be that women's basketball, the WNBA specifically, will become more watched in the summer. I think that we're going to see a new wave of people wanting to follow Caitlin Clark to the end of times.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I really agree with both of your guys' points. I think that, in recent, years, there's been a push towards women's sports, and I think we finally hit a point where we've got the star in Caitlin Clark, who's now, put women's sports on her back and said, okay, let's go, and the ratings show that people want to tune in and they want to watch Caitlin Clark out on the court. And I think I don't even know, it doesn't do it justice. I mean, you look at ticket prices for the games that she played in. I mean, I was at an Ohio State-Wisconsin game in Ohio State, and I paid $15 for a ticket. Caitlin Clark at a game, tickets are in hundreds of dollars. So it's crazy to see, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, and going to South Carolina now, the team that was the best team in women's basketball, are they the best team in women's basketball history?
I think a case could potentially be made that they are one of the greatest teams of all time. I don't know if I would say they're the best ever, but you look at these last 3 years by South Carolina, specifically since head coach Dawn Staley came to town, 2 rings in 3 years. Over that 3-year stretch, they've amassed a record of 109-3. 109 wins, 3 losses since she came to town. And honestly, that's just dominant. I mean, you look at their performance just in the championship game. Their bench outscored Iowa's bench 37-0, which shows that they've got plenty of depth. They out-rebounded Iowa 51-29, so they were giving themselves more opportunities with the ball. And they're returning potentially 3 of their 5 starters, so they could be back next year for even more.
Okay, so moving on to men's basketball, UConn becomes the first team to repeat since the Florida Gators. Should they be considered a blue blood?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I think they should be considered a blue blood. I mean, these last 2 years have been just completely dominant in the tournament. They've won every game by double digits. And I mean, you saw what they did to Illinois, beating them by, 30? And Purdue last night for the championship. I mean, this is something that we haven't even really seen before, and it's more impressive than what the Gators did in 06 and 07 because they returned all 5 starters. And UConn, they lost 3 of their 5 starters, including 2 of their top scorers, which that's all it needs to really tell you. They're definitely a blue blood.
And like you said, we haven't seen something like this, so I'm going to take it a step further. and I'm actually going to put them in a different category, a new blood. This team is the first team to repeat in nearly 20 years. They have won 6 national titles since 1999. That means out of the last 25 years, UConn has accumulated 24% of the total winners. UConn is also a 6-0 in championship games. They're perfect in championship games. When it matters most, they win. And they're starting to creep up on the Blue Bloods. They already surpassed Duke. Is Kentucky next?
Yeah, and I will play devil's advocate here just a little bit. This is an interesting fact, but goes to their point. 1977 was the last time UConn hired a basketball coach who did not win the national title. But also, I think this is kind of interesting here. You two have been talking about how, 6 titles, which is great. In the last 25 years, when we think of, a blue blood program, we're thinking of, many years. I mean, UCLA, 11 titles, Kentucky, 8. But if you think about it, UConn up until 1999 had never appeared in a Final Four game. So, I mean, if you're looking at long-term success, they're right on the cusp, I think, in my opinion, of being that school.
When we come back, we will get caught up on all things Titan athletics. Don't change that dial. Welcome back, everyone, to Titan Recap. We have a few recaps to get us, so Ben, walk us through softball.
All right, well, Dylan, I've got a question for you. Is there anything better than starting a season 18-0?
No, I don't think so.
Well, that's exactly what the women's softball team has done. They continued their dominating season with a doubleheader win against St. Norbert. Game 1, we saw Abby Friesmuth hold the Green Knights to only 7 hits and 1 run over 7 innings. The only run St. Norbert was able to score came off a throwing error in the 6th. Abby Friesmuth would get ample support from Sophie Wary and Haley Whitman. Final score in Game 1, Titans 4 to St. Norbert's 1. Game 2 was even more dominating, with Brianna Bougie throwing their 3rd no-hitter of 2024 and the slaughter rule coming into effect at the end of the 6th inning. The Titans crushed St. Norbert 8-0.
So before we get into any more recaps, we have to talk about women's softball. I will offer this up to the table because this team looks unstoppable. But does this team go undefeated the entire season?
I mean, normally I would say no for baseball or softball just because it's so hard to win that many games. But I mean, if you look at how this team has performed so far this season, they have been, like you said, unstoppable. They have been dominant. I mean, 10 of 18 games have been shutouts, which is unbelievable. They've allowed more than 1 run in just 3 games out of 18 that they've played. That's just, it's kind of crazy success, something that I don't know if anybody really expected to see coming out of them. If they can finish the season undefeated, that's going to be a tough task, but it's something that I think that they could definitely do.
Yeah, I don't think they will, just because conference play is coming, and we know that the WIAC conference is super competitive. I think once the conference play opens up, we're heading there right now currently, I think they're going to start to see some better competition, such as lacrosse. They are a credible softball program, so I think that we'll see some real good softball matchups heading into the WIAC and conference play.
Yeah, I agree with both your guys' points, but to me, the 18-0, while it is really impressive, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to trash what they're up to right now, but if you look at some of the teams that they played in that 18-0 stretch, there were a lot of teams that had 0 wins or were under 500. So, I mean, like you pointed out, Dylan, I'm really interested to see when it comes conference time, because both of you guys know that the WIAC conference, in terms of Division III, is one of the toughest conferences in the nation when it comes to D3.
So I want to say that this team is super balanced, but what's more impressive, the pitching or the hitting?
I personally think I have to say pitching, because like I said, you saw 10 of 18 games shutouts, like I said. I mean, on the recap, Brianna Bougie throwing what was the 14th no-hitter in program history, and that was in her first collegiate start of her entire career. The 13th no-hitter in program history was just 10 days earlier, and Sydney Nemitz, who's been absolutely lighting it up this season. She just won her second WIAC Quick Trip Softball Pitcher of the Week for the week of March 25th through the 31st. She struck out a career-high 16 on March 26th. So, I mean, it's not just one pitcher that's carrying this team. It's multiple people who have been contributing, and the results have been dominant.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. I think that the pitching and the rotation specifically is just unfathomable of how incredible they are doing. They're holding teams to under 1 run for majority of the games. There's 3 games where a team has scored 2 or more runs this entire year. And you look at the amount of shutouts, there's 10 shutouts on the season, and the bats are just, the bats can come and go. Like we saw a game that was 6-5 in the middle of the season, but the bats, that was the only game they really had to rely on the bats, where most of their games are blowouts like 8-0.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say their hitting has been pretty good. I mean, on the last 6 games, they've scored 50 runs. And like you guys said, obviously, the pitching is really important in those moments, but just the amount of runs they've been able to score. I mean, they're already at 124 runs yet, and we're not even, to conference time. We're just sitting at, non-conference play here. So, I mean, to me, that's what I find impressive.
So now to switch gear over to baseball, the men's baseball team has not been doing so well. They have dropped 3 of their last 4 games. Their last 4 games were played against UW-Whitewater, and to say it went even decently would be a massive understatement. The one game that they did win didn't see any real action until the 6th inning when Nick Sheehu homered off the Warhawks pitcher Max Hosebro, and the Titans would pull off the win 6-3 for the final game between the Titans and the Warhawks. They had to initiate their slaughter after 7 innings with the Warhawks, winning 12-2. This is not a great look for the Titans, who are 5-3 in conference play.
Men's and women's outdoor track and field teams competed in the UW Lacrosse Ashton May Invitational over the weekend, with the women winning 3 events and the men placing 4th out of 6 teams. For the women, Amelia Lehman finished 2nd in the 1,500-meter run. Maddie Lavoie won the 400-meter dash, and Brenna Masloff won the shot put with a cast of 13.7 meters. The men didn't do too poorly either, with Joshua Rivers breaking his own long jump record with a jump of 7.47 meters. Joshua Rivers also leads the NCAA Division III with his own record. Gavin Frisch took home 2nd with his discus throw of 40.09 meters, and the 4x4 meter relay squad placed in the top 6 with times giving them 3rd and 4th. And 5th place finishes. The men's and women's outdoors track and field team will compete next in the UW Platteville Invitational on April 12th through the 13th.
When we come back, we are going to show you a special behind-the-scenes look at the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers. Don't touch that dial.
Have you always wanted to try beekeeping? Do you care about the environment? You're going to want to be a part of the UWO Sustainable Beekeeping Club. Honeybees need your help to combat the pollinator crisis. Learn the skills to become a sweet keeper. Try on a bee suit. Collect honeycomb for wax and honey. Join Sustainable Beekeeping Club and see what all the buzz is about.
If you're a student looking to get into Japanese culture, then look no further than Club Nippon here at UW Oshkosh. At Club Nippon, we're proud to bring authentic Japanese traditions from across the sea right here to campus. One of them being a night of mask making, and with other activities such as calligraphy and trying out Japanese foods on the horizon, we'd love to have you here at Club Nippon.
Climate change is inevitable. You can't do anything about it, and you should really just give up.
Whoa, Jeremy, who brought the soundboard? Why are you lying to these people? Sure, things may seem hopeless, but there's still things we can do about climate change. From recycling to eating less meat. You can also contact your local, state, and national representatives to let them know that you care about climate change.
When you go to a baseball game or even watch one at home, you might not realize all of the work that goes into each and every game. From the replay on the video board to the funny sound effects that you might hear, this all comes from the hard work of the people behind the broadcast. Our very own Becca Hawbaker sat down with Noah Hintz to get a little behind the scenes on what goes on at the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers. Word of warning, Becca couldn't do the reporter track because she was sick, so our executive producer, Alex Walzak, had to do the voice recording.
Located in Appleton, Wisconsin, the Timber Rattlers play at the Neuroscience Group Field at Fox City Stadium. The Rattlers are a minor league baseball team of the Midwest League and the High A affiliate of the Milwaukee Brewers.
My name is Noah Hintz. I'm the video production manager for the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers. This will be my second season, starting in April.
Hintz is responsible for overseeing all of the visual and audio elements of the game.
Pretty much anything that you're seeing or hearing at the ballpark more or less funnels through me. That's in-game action, that's in between inning promos, all that stuff, beginning, end, you name it. Right behind me is kind of technical directing switcher, so this is where kind of all the button pushing really happens, cutting cameras, graphics, overlaying graphics, replay, kind of all that gets meshed together and sent out. Kind of turning more toward in-stadium video board work, so responsible for kind of everything that goes up on our digital screens. That's the video board, ribbon board. We have a music audio position where that's responsible for ballpark sound. So if you hear a fun walk-up songs or funny little jingles in between batters or plays or whatever, that's all through there. Controls sound throughout the whole stadium, front of house, on field, you name it.
The crew also covers the audio and graphics for in-game advertising, as well as radio broadcasting and replay, which is responsible for cutting highlights of the game and featured promotions.
I kind of lay out the roadmap for how all that goes, but it's really up to kind of the crew and their work to really execute those visions. So for as much, I put in a lot of time on the shows, but it's all kind of worth it too when you kind of get down and you have a really awesome broadcast and you know that people are having a good time. You can hear people having a good time.
For Titan Recap, Alex Walzak.
I want to give a quick thank you to Noah Hintz for doing the interview, and if you want to find out more information about the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers, you can go to their webpage, milb.com/Wisconsin, to find out more.
Time for an update on your Milwaukee Bucks. They have a game tonight against what is the most dominant team in NBA basketball this year, the Boston Celtics tonight. That game started at about 6:30. They just need to hold on right now. They're kind of in a tough spot. The Bucks have lost their last 4 games. They've got 4 games left after tonight, and it's looking tight in the middle of the Eastern Conference. The middle 5 teams are all separated by about 2 or 3 games maximum. So right now the Bucks really need to dial in and get their stuff together, because if they slide, they could slide far fast.
So this past weekend was WrestleMania, and I was in awe of the performance that these professional wrestlers had. We had 6 title changes, and the WWE Universe was introduced to a new era of professional wrestling. I like to call it the Renaissance era, because it seems like wrestling is becoming more popular. It's becoming back into pop culture. We're seeing Pat McAfee on ESPN doing interviews with the likes of John Cena. And I think we're going to get a new era of wrestling, and I thought this WrestleMania kicked it off. And there were so many great moments. My favorite moment was probably Cody Rhodes finally finishing his 2-year-long story. R-Truth winning his first WrestleMania match ever was awesome in the ladder match. Bayley finally getting her Mania moment with a crowd. And my favorite entrance was definitely DIY coming out as DX. That was just awesome. DX is probably one of my favorite tag teams of all time, so to see DIY do that. My favorite match of the night was easily Cody versus Roman Part 2, where John Cena, Jey Uso, Seth Rollins, The Rock, and Undertaker came out, and it was basically WWE Endgame. It was amazing. It was like I was 10 years old again watching WWE. It was awesome. I popped so hard so many times during WrestleMania, and I'm so glad to say that wrestling is indeed cool again. When we come back, the table shares their spiciest takes. Stick around for the heat here on Titan Recap.
The Multicultural Education Center serves as a home for all multicultural and international students on campus. The MEC House was built to support you as you work, study, live, and play. On-campus MEC resources help you take care of your overall health and well-being. Visit us at the MEC House, your home away from home.
Come to the final part of the show where we, the table, share our final hot takes in the segment Speak Now or Forever Hold Your Peace. All right, this is where the gloves come off and we lay it all out on the table before God and man. Give me your hottest take on Titan athletics, Wisconsin sports, or even March Madness from this past weekend. Ben, let's start with you.
All right, well, I'm going to talk about the biggest elephant on the basketball court for these last few games, Zach Edey. Everyone seems to have a big opinion about him, and well, my take might not be too hot because the opinion doesn't seem to be super hot around the country, but I don't think Zach Edey is going to translate super well to the NBA. And I mean, I don't want to necessarily give too much credibility to the people who say he's only good because he's 7'4", 300 pounds, because if that was true, then everybody who is over 7 feet would be dominating like he is. I mean, I don't want to misconstrue anything. He is definitely a dominant basketball player with a great skill set. But the criticism could potentially be made that he is something of a one-trick pony. I mean, he is going to come at you every single time and back you down into the paint, right under the hoop, and he's going to score on your head every time. And that's what he's really done for the last 5 years since he's been in college, and no one has really been able to figure him out. But you look at the championship against UConn, he scored 37 points against Donovan Clingan, who is what a lot of people said might be the only person who could stop him. Not to say that UConn didn't really have him figured out, because they were able to stop Purdue from pretty much everywhere else on the floor. They're usually a really great three-point shooting team. They shut that down, and they kind of allowed Zach Edey to have whatever he wants. The thing is, when Edey gets to the NBA, I don't know that he's really going to be able to keep that kind of pattern up and sustain the kind of success that he has, because you're going to run into the guys like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, who, you know, they can beat you from other places other than right under the hoop. If he wants to develop into an NBA caliber player, he really has to figure out how to succeed from other areas in other ways, because they're going to be able to figure him out sooner or later.
Couldn't the same be said about Rudy Gobert, though? What if a team drafts Edey in the second round, or maybe the first round, and they specifically utilize his strengths, like what the Timberwolves and Jazz did with Rudy Gobert? Rudy Gobert is the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year again. He's won it twice previously. He's had a very successful NBA career by not shooting the three. He's been the Eiffel Tower of the paint. He's literally been the best defensive player that a big man that we've seen in some time. Back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards. He's the front runner this year. He's really reshaped the way a big man can be used. And I think a team that takes Edey, that has a stretch four, like, let's say the Spurs, and they move Wembanyama to the four, and they have a stretch four in Wembanyama, and you have a Zach Edey that's just doing drop coverage like a Brook Lopez and sits in the paint. He doesn't have to space out the floor. Wembanyama's not going to get clogged up on the paint because of Edey, because he can stretch and space out the floor.
I could see it happening, but it's just something you have to wait and see with, because I can't really predict that. You know, in general, Edey has played a style of basketball that feels really old to me, and in the NBA, the center position has been constantly evolving in terms of expectations. But we'll wait and see.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because I was thinking the exact same thing. After watching the tournament, you know, all of the games and being able to kind of dissect what's going on with him, I kind of agree. While he's a great college sensation, we've seen so many players, and you could say this for any, you know, sport in college, that were good in college, but in terms of the NBA transferring over, it just doesn't happen. I mean, if you're a big man in the NBA right now that can't shoot you're not worth a whole heck of a lot. I mean, maybe, you know, 2000s, 80s, if you're talking those areas and you want to go in and, you know, Zach Edey's playing back then, sure, he's got his era down. But I mean, right now, he's, in my opinion, somebody that you're going to want to take if you're an NBA team as kind of a project player, you know, to bring in and kind of say, okay, you know, off the bat, we're just going to have to figure out, you know, what we're going to do with you down the stretch. You're not somebody that we're going to bring in and, you know, use right off the bat. So that's my take there.
And I think that's what I was alluding to, of being a second-round pick and a team taking him just to hone in on his strengths, meaning to really utilize his inside pacing and utilize his defensive effort so that he can become a Rudy Gobert-esque player. Thank you to everyone for being here with us on this Tuesday Catch past episodes of Titan Recap on the VOD by going to titan-tv.org and clicking on the VOD link. From all of us here at Titan Recap, have a great night.